everyone. Good morning, classmates. I am Jonathan Martinez and I am the next reporter. And my report is all about leadership and communications. But first, let me discuss to you what leadership is. Leadership is an important aspect of managing. The ability to lead effectively is one of the keys to being an effective manager. Managers must exercise all the elements of their role to combine human and material resources. And last, all managers should become good leaders. Leadership is generally defined as the art and science of influencing people so that they willingly move toward the achievement of the group goals. This concept can enlarge to imply not only willingness to work but willingness to work with zeal and confidence. To lead is to guide, direct, proceed, and conduct. Leadership is the process of influencing the activities of the members. Leaders is the person who takes the central role in this interaction by influencing the behavior of the members of the group. Who is the leader? In organization, of course, the managers. They can influence the behavior of the members of the formal work group. Leadership styles. First, we have democratic leadership. It is commonly effective. Democratic leadership is one of the most effective styles. The leader makes decisions based on the input of each team member. Like, for example, in a company board meeting, a democratic leader might give the team a few decision related options. They could then open a discussion about each option. After a discussion, this leader might take the board's thoughts and feedback into consideration, or they might open this decision up to vote. Autocratic leadership, it is rarely effective today. Autocratic leadership is the inverse of democratic leadership. The leader makes decisions without taking input from everyone who reports to them. Like, for example, when a manager changes the hours of work shifts for multiple employees without consulting anyone, especially the effective employees. Next, we have laissez-faire leadership, sometimes effective. It literally translates let them do. Like, for example, you might see laissez-faire company founder who makes no major of his policies around work hours or deadlines. They might put full trust into their employees while they focus on the overall workings of running the company. Therefore, it's important that this leadership style is kept in check. Next, we have strategic leadership. It is commonly effective. Strategic leaders sit at the intersection between a company's main operations and its opportunities. This is a desirable leadership style in many companies because strategic thinking supports multiple types of employees at once. Next, we have transformational leadership. It is sometimes effective. From the word transform, it is always transforming and improving upon the company's conventions. All employees might get a list of goals to reach and as well as deadlines for reaching them. This is a highly encouraged form of leadership among growth-minded companies because it motivates employees to see what they're capable of. Next, we have transactional leadership. It is sometimes effective. Transactional leaders are fairly common today. These managers reward their employees for precisely the work they do. Like, for example, if you work in marketing, you might receive a bonus for sending 10 marketing emails. On the other hand, a transactional leader might only offer you a bonus if your work result in a large amount of newsletter subscriptions. Next, we have coach style leadership. It is commonly effective. These leaders focuses on identifying and nurturing the individual strengths of their members of his or her team. This leader might build a team where each employee has an expertise or skill set in something different. It help it helps people or employees improve on their strengths by giving them new tasks to try, offering them guidance, or meeting to discuss constructive feedback. And lastly, we have bureaucratic leadership. It is rarely effective. This style of leadership might listen and consider the input of employees, unlike autocratic leadership. But the leader tends to reject an employee's input if it conflicts with the company policy or past practices. My next topic is about communication. Communication is the transfer of information that is meaningful to those who are involved. It is the transmittal of understanding. Communication is an interchange of thoughts or information, the transfer of information from one person to another. An important means of attaining organizations' goals. Next, we have types of communication. We have formal communication, informal communication, communication between groups, interpersonal communication, upward and downward communication, and lateral communication. Communication and downward formal and downward communication are formal methods of communication in many organizations. The form the information flows down through the formal channels in the organization. Information sent down will be in the form of orders, instructions, and routine information. The channel used to carry the information downwards are poster and bulletin boards, company magazine and newspapers, letters and pay inserts, employee handbooks and pamphlets, information racks, loudspeaker or intercom system, annual reports, and so on. Upwards, upward communication is encouraged by some innovative organizations. Trust is a very important element which facilitate more upward communication. Upward flow of communication can be facilitated through the grievance procedure, the complaint system, counseling methods, survey questionnaires, an open door policy, exit interviews, special meetings, suggestion system, and other participative techniques. Lateral communication, or what we call peer level communication. It enables members of particular level in the organization to share information. It takes some pressure off the supervisor. Lateral communication can be fostered in some many ways, such as committees, conferences, and group discussions. Distribution of written communication across departmental lines is also another method of improving lateral communication. My next topic is all about grapevines. Many informal paths of communication also exist in organization. These informal channels are generally referred to as grapevines. The organization grapevine often results from the organization's informal work groups. Ways to communicate. We have here the 12 ways to communicate by William X. Thor. First, we have informal talk or grapevine communication. This is the most fundamental form of communication usually adopted by an informal organization. We have also memoranda, telephone calls, inter-office news, letters, reports, conference and conventions, meetings, bulletin board notices, exhibits and displays, and visual aids. Downward and lateral information flow. It is understandable too that the downward and lateral information for decision making is important to subordinate managers in an enterprise. Downward flow of information is a time-consuming process. Upward flow of information. Information moves upward from the supervisory level and is summarized from consumption of department managers who take action within the scope of their authority. Communication networks. Communication networks refer to the pictorial depictions of informal channels. Two-way communication involves feedback and participation. In other research study, it was found that the effective groups involved in complex tasks use decentralized communication patterns, while routine tasks involved centralized communication patterns. Next, we have barriers of communication. First, we have distance. The physical distance between the supervisor and his subordinates results in less face-to-face communication. We know that less face-to-face communication may lead to misunderstanding or lack of understanding of the message being communicated. Next, we have distortion. This occurs when an individual fails to distinguish data from his own views, feelings, emotion, and etc. Next, we have semantics. This deals with the language aspect of communication. Graham states that the structure of our language leads to misinterpretation of true nature of events. In the English language and in other languages, there are certain rather words which have multiple meanings. Lack of leveling. This refers to various differences in the level of supervisors and subordinates. For instance, there is a difference in the level of knowledge and expertise of a supervisor and subordinate. If a supervisor communicates with his subordinates on his own level of knowledge and ignore the level of subordinates, then the communication breaks down. Sometimes supervisors tend to use supervisory jargon, either technical or administrative, which is totally alien to the subordinates. Next, we have lack of trust. If the subordinate feels that this is not good for him to report the news to bad news to the supervisor, then he will withhold such information from the supervisor. On the other hand, if he feels that the supervisor is considerate and helpful, then he will not filter bad news or unfavorable information. There are some supervisors who use subordinates for their own selfish interest, such as promotion, merit increase, and good image. Such activities may change subordinates' trust in the supervisor. Inaccessibility. Such inaccessibility results in communication breakdown. This inaccessibility is not necessarily physical, it can be psychological. When your supervisor is super busy and hindi nyo siya ma-approach for important matters, then it will result to breakdown of communication. Lack of clear responsibilities. When the responsibilities assigned to the subordinates are not clear, they find scapegoats or come out with excuses. Often we hear people say, I thought this is what you wanted me to do. From the word I thought, meaning you are not that sure. Therefore, the information is unclear and there is lack of clarity in duties and responsibilities. Next, we have personal incompatibility. Often, the personality of the supervisor and the subordinate clash and thus create communication blocks. Rather than viewing things objectively, personality factors dominate and issues become personalized. Next, we have refusal to listen. Such an attitude blocks effective communication. Next, we have failure to use proper media. Several types of media are available in the organizational situation for communication purposes. The effectiveness of communications depends on how a supervisor chooses the proper media for his own situation. Some supervisors take great pride in sending written memos loaded with jargon to their subordinates who lack reading and comprehension levels. Next, we have communication gap. This refers to the defects of loopholes in the formal network of communication. In large and complex organizations, this kind of barrier is a common occurrence. And lastly, we have lack of direction. A lack of direction in message content may present a barrier. Some messages have two types of content, the manifest or evident meaning and the latent or real meaning. In some cases, the manifest meaning of the message is made to attract that the real meaning is lost. So next we have the communications process and the elements of communication. Concept of communication. It is an important aspect that affects human behavior. It happens when the intended message of the sender is received and interpreted. The exchange of information rather with the others occurs between two or more individuals interpersonal communication. It should be open to all people with the organization. According to Hicks, communication is important in the management of organization. Function of communication, we have control, information, motivation, and emotional expression. So isa-isahin natin. Communication acts to control member in many ways. This can shown when an employee is required to communicate any job-related grievance to their boss to follow their job description, or to comply with company policies. Next, we have communication promotes motivation by clear defining to employees the things to be done, how well they are doing, and what can be done to improve their performance. Next, we have communication permits the release of emotional expression of feelings and for fulfillment of needs. Communication that takes place within the group is a fundamental mechanism by which members show their frustrations and feeling of satisfaction. And lastly, we have communication provides information that individuals and group need to make decisions by transmitting the data to identify and evaluate alternative choices. A communication model. Before communication can take place, a purpose expresses as a message to be conveyed is needed. It passes between a source and the sender. The message is encoded and passed by way of some medium to the receiver, who translates the message initiated by the sender. The result is transference of meaning from one person to another. The source initiate a message by encoding a thought. Four conditions have been described that affect the encoded messages. We have skills, attitudes, knowledge, and social cultural system. The message, it is the actual product from the source encoding. So the message here is the one that's sent by the sender. Or movie starts at 9. Can you drive us? Next, we have channel, the medium through which the message travel. So the medium or the channel used here is the cell phone. Decoding, a translation of symbols into a form that can be understood by the receiver, or what I have understand. So when the receiver is na-decode na, magbibigay na siya ng feedback niya. The feedback here is the final link in the communication process. It checks on how successful in transferring out message as originally intended. So the feedback here is the yeah, be there by 8:30. Next, we have types of communication. We have interpersonal communication. This form of communication involves communication of one with another person, either in physical or non-physical. Next, we have organizational communication. In the context of organization, communication processes are utilized in coordinating behavior directed toward individual and organizational goals. In organizational communication, we have internal communication. It is the flow of information within the organization. If we have internal communication, we also have external communication. It is the organization's communication outside of itself. Next, we have mass communication, another type of communication essential to organization. This is a type of communication directed towards large and anonymous audiences, and the message are transmitted publicly and designed to reach most audience members simultaneously. Levels of source and receiver. First, we have downward. The message flows from the top to bottom, or from top management going down to the rank and file. Next, we have upward. The movement of communication in this level is from bottom to top, or rank and file to top management. Next, we have horizontal. Communication with the same level and can be used extensively in coordinating purposes, sharing plans, settlement of interdepartmental conflicts. Its main motivation is being task-oriented. Next, we have circular. Starts at any point on level, moves to any point or level, moves back and forth in either formal or informal discussion. Next, we have cross-channel and diagonal communication, inter-unit exchanges, or in co-orientation activities. Communication in this case flows across the chain of command. My last topic is all about factors that affect quality of communication. First, we have well-defined goals. In order for the intended information to be fully understood, there must be goal clarity, or the goal must be well defined and specific. Next, we have personality of the sender. If the sender is highly educated, then he may use some sophisticated word that could be hardly understood in the lower level. If the sender receives for informal education, then there is possibility that he may not use appropriate word in his communication. Next, we have also personality of the receiver. Again, the personality and the condition of person receiving the message is to be considered. If the receiver is in mourn due to the death of a family member, then there is the tendency that he, for the meantime, he could hardly receive instructions well as deceived by his problem. Shared experiences provides a frame of reference that is common to sender and receiver, which means that if the extent of common experience between the two is wide, then understanding could be easily achieved. Use of symbol. Communication symbol uses symbol, both verbal and non-verbal, through pictures, signs, and actions. In verbal, content and format is important, while in non-verbal examples are the traffic lights, which has green lights for go and red lights for stop, the pedestrian lane, and the traffic signs along the highway. Next, we have medium used. Refers to the various forms on how the message is being transmitted. This may be in the form of bulletin boards, radio broadcast. It is the channel of transmission. Next, we have pathways. This is the passage through which message travels, a clear passage with no interruption, loud noises, and communication breakdown makes communication fast and clear. In organizational hierarchy, the longer is the hierarchy, the longer is the travel of communication. In information overload. Due to technological advancement, there is a tendency that managers will be overloaded with incoming messages that might lead to overlooking important data and information related to the organization. And lastly, we have feedback. The reaction rather of the recipient to the communication. This reflects how the receiver reacts to the communication forwarded to him and how he follows the instructions therein. If he clearly understood the instruction and follows it according to the view of the sender, then the communication is a success. So that's all for my report. Thank you for listening.